Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name, of course, is John Campea, and Star Wars: The Last Jedi is now out in theaters everywhere. Audiences are starting to see it. The critics have all seen it. It's blowing up the box office, the number 2 all-time Thursday night opening ever at $45 million. But there's been a lot of talking going on social media today. I've been getting inundated all day with two sides, the light side and the dark side. Which one is which, I'll let you decide. I don't really care. But here's what we've got. Okay, we have 5 major, if you really want to consider it as a big picture, we have 5 major kind of review system things for us. 2 of them are critic-based, 3 of them audience-based out of the 5. 2 of them, the 2 critic-based ones, are, of course, Rotten Tomatoes score and Metacritic. For audience scores, the 3 main sources are IMDB, audience score, Rotten Tomatoes' own audience score, and of course, Cinemascore. Now, Cinemascore doesn't come out, I believe, until tomorrow, maybe even the next day. But 4 out of the 5 possible overall audience and critic scoring things have come out. 3 of them very positive, 1 of them not so positive at all. So what do we've got? We've got on Rotten Tomatoes critic score, we've got a 93 for Star Wars: The Last Jedi. On Metacritic, which some people prefer Metacritic over Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic gives it a very positive 86. So that's where that stands right now. Now, as far as the audience stuff goes, this is where things get tricky. Because most of today, I've been getting tons of tweets and Facebook messages and whatever saying, John, did you see the great audience score for The Last Jedi on IMDb? It's got like an 80%, and now it's at like 81%. Then I'm getting tons of tweets and people from going, John, did you see how bad the audience scores are for Star Wars: The Last Jedi? It's at like 56%. So getting these confusing things. And sure enough, when you go over and look at these 2 competing, critic score metrics, we go over to IMDB, and sure enough, IMDB with 50,000 votes over there has an 8.1 out of 10, essentially an 81%. That's a great score. Wonderful. It's not the best score in the world, but it's a great score. Wonderful. 8.1%. Great. So the Rotten Tomatoes critic rating is awesome at 90+%. The Metacritic score is super solid at 86%. And now the audience score is great with 81. But wait a minute. There's another audience score out there, and that's the Rotten Tomatoes audience score. And while the critic score, much like at Metacritic, is at 93, the audience score for The Last Jedi at Rotten Tomatoes is 56%. 56%. Again, the IMDb audience scores 81%. The Rotten Tomatoes audience scores 56%. So the question becomes, which one should we believe? Now, let's take the critic scores out of it for a second. Let's take Metacritic out of it. Let's take Rotten Tomatoes out of it. So we take the critic scores out of it for a second. They're awesome. We know that. So let's just take those out of the discussion for now. So here we've got the 2 of the major audience score metrics that seem to be completely opposed. They have in the same ballpark of votes. The last I checked, I think Rotten Tomatoes has like 65,000 votes. The IMDb thing has over 50,000 votes. So they're in the same neighborhood together. But one is markedly more positive, and one is markedly more negative. Now, granted, 81% is not the best score, 57% is not the worst score, but still, they are pretty much diametrically opposed views. One is saying that the movie's really good, one set of audience scores, another set of audience scores saying they're not so good. Now, of course, missing from all this right now, again, is Cinemascore. Cinemascore is the one that's missing for this, and I'll talk about the relevance of that in a second. Now, I did mention this stuff earlier today, like on the John Campea show, but so many people are still tweeting me about it, I thought it would be beneficial to do a standalone video on this, just to address this quickly. When it comes to me, and some of you who follow me on social media, you may have seen me say this earlier. When it comes down to the question, IMDb's audience score or Rotten Tomato audience score, one being positive, one being negative, which one should we believe? The answer is neither. You shouldn't believe either of them. Why? Because of this. Both IMDb's audience score system and Rotten Tomatoes audience score system are based on incredibly flawed systems that allow people to jump in there and vote whether or not they've seen the movie. I mean, we've seen on 4chan and a few other places where many times with different movies, people organize on channels, say, go give down votes to this movie even before a movie's ever come out, or go give up votes to this movie even before a movie's ever come out. You have a system here where people are able to rush in, both on IMDb and on Rotten Tomatoes, and put in votes without ever seeing the movie, and vote multiple times without ever seeing the movie. And there is no way to judge which votes are legitimate votes and which ones are not. So yes, IMDb gives a positive 81%, brilliant. Yes, the Rotten Tomatoes one gives a more negative one at 56%, fine. But the reality is we can't really depend on either of them because both of them are systems where people who haven't even seen the movie can go and vote. And when you get other external channels trying to organize their fellow, like whether it's 4chan or whether it's somewhere on Reddit or whether it's whatever, trying to organize people, hey, whether you've seen the movie or not, go to this site and downvote it. When you live in that type of an era, you can't really take them too seriously. Both the IMDb audience rating and the Rotten Tomatoes audience rating are both interesting to point out for various discussions on different movies, but ultimately they mean nothing. The only audience score metric that is actually legitimate is Cinemascore. And here's why. I mean, just read in their description. Cinemascore is the industry leader in measuring movie appeal among theater audiences since 1978. Cinemascore has been polling moviegoers at major movie releases on opening night to collect demographic information and calculate distinctive Cinemascore grade. In other words, what differentiates Cinemascore from, say, IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes, one good, one bad, is the fact that Cinemascore is actually talking to people who actually just walked out of seeing the movie. Cinemascore validates and confirms that the people voting and contributing towards their score are people who are actually in the theater watching the movie, and they can validate that they've all only actually scored it once. That alone makes Cinemascore the only legitimate score. When it comes to the audience side, on the critic side, that's something different. You got Rotten Tomatoes score, you got the Metacritic score, and they both seem to be in agreement. But on the audience side, you got IMDb saying one thing, you got Rotten Tomatoes saying the other thing. That's all well and good, but we got to wait and see what that other score is. Now, that doesn't take away from what anybody thinks about the movie. Look, you're going to like or not like Star Wars: The Last Jedi for your own reasons. Regardless of what the audience score says, regardless of what the critic score says, you're going to see it and have your own opinion about the movie. Me, I really like the movie. Have my problems with it, the whole Finn storyline. That's no spoiler, but the Finn storyline, the DJ character, I didn't like it whatsoever, but most of the rest of it I totally loved. You may have the same experience as me. You may have a different experience than me. The bottom line, though, is when it comes down to which audience score should we listen to, the IMDb positive one or the Rotten Tomatoes negative one, the answer is neither. Let's wait to see the Cinemascore comes out, and even after that, none of those should dictate what you think about the movie. What you think about the movie is ultimately the most important thing. So listen here. I want to actually go to hear some of your guys' opinions here. If you guys are watching this video right now, jump on Twitter, fire me in a tweet. Just tweet to me simply at John Campea. I'll just take this for about another 5 minutes or so, but I do want to hear what you guys are thinking about this, particularly about this whole discrepancy between the IMDb viewer ratings and the Rotten Tomatoes viewer ratings, because it still does raise an interesting question. Why is there so much disparity? Why is there so much disparity between, one being positive and one being negative, despite having roughly in the same neighborhood number of votes? Some people would suggest to you it's because some people are organizing to go and be negative on one site. Some might say the opposite, saying there are people organizing to go and be positive on another. Who knows? But it really does depend on which site you visit, and depends on which one you want to listen to. Ultimately, I still think we shouldn't really listen to any of them. Just going to go quickly over to a super chat that came in from Jeffrey Profit, who writes, "Hey John, what do you think about how the movie handled Luke?" Well, I don't want to get into a discussion on the movie. I don't want to sit here and give my review of the movie. Personally, look, I'll just tell you this one. I loved the way they handled Luke in the movie. I thought the way they handled Luke in the movie was absolutely fantastic. I loved it. But, other people have different opinions. I thought it was a great way to handle a character who has been through hell and back and went through traumatic experiences and ultimately led to him doing what he does. But other than that, I really don't want to use this video as a review of the movie. I really want to focus more on the topic at hand. And TJ Thomas wrote in a super chat saying that he's become a Patreon supporter of mine. Thank you so much, TJ. I really appreciate that. But with that out of the way, let me jump over to Twitter here. I do want to hear what some of you guys have to say about this whole thing about audience ratings. Which one should we listen to? Which one should we not listen to? Anyway, we get one from Arcadis, who writes, the film is a bit middle of the road to me. I think they made some good choices. I think they made some bad choices. I'm not far off from you either, Arcadis. I think they made some really good choices. I think they made a couple of bad ones. Overall, I thought the film was great, but I do believe they stumbled in a couple of places. So I'm kind of with you on that. Some good things, some bad, like most movies in general. Let's see. This great one comes in from Horde Only. Horde for the Horde. I'm an undead mage, by the way. Horde Only writes, indeed, I'll always take a critic's opinion over an average person's, maybe not John's, but in general. Fair enough. Let's see. This one comes to us from Clovey K writes, do you think people may not have liked The Last Jedi because they were expecting one thing and got something else? I mean, that's possible, but we always want to be careful ascribing an excuse as to why somebody likes or doesn't like something. I think it's best for us just to go, hey, they like something or they didn't like something, and just leave it at that, and not try to give it an excuse and not try to give it a reason for them liking it or not liking it. They either liked it or they didn't, and we don't have to find an excuse for why they liked it or they didn't. If some people didn't like it, it's just because they didn't like it, and that's totally fair. Could a movie not meeting your expectations affect that? Sure, I guess that can be one thing, but let's not make an excuse for why somebody doesn't like it. Let's just accept that some people don't like it, and that's totally fair. Another super chat came in from Anthony Everson, who writes, love The Last Jedi, one of the few Star Wars movies that pulled on my heartstrings. Oh my God, the theater I was in last night, and not everybody had this experience. I'm sure there were some movie theaters that had the opposite reaction, but I was in a movie theater last night at the AMC Burbank 16, and when the credits rolled at the end, the place erupted in a standing ovation. I'm sure not every movie theater was like that, but the one I happened to be in had that. Thanks a lot for that. Brody O'Connor writes in, The Last Jedi has a minus 30% Rotten Tomato difference compared to The Force Awakens. Can you compare percentages and the same movie franchise? Well, no, first of all, The Last Jedi does not have a minus 30% Rotten Tomatoes difference. They're both in the high 90s. That's the real Rotten Tomato score is the critic score. That's the real score. When you're talking about audience reactions, again, you cannot take Rotten Tomatoes audience scores as worth anything. They're not worth the toilet paper you just used to wipe your baby's ass. All right? It's not worth it, because anybody who hasn't seen the movie can go and vote, and it makes no difference. So again, then it depends on which audience score you're looking at. Are you looking at the Rotten Tomatoes audience score? Or are you looking at the IMDB audience score? And then ultimately, at the end of the day, neither one of them mean anything. Only the Cinemascore is the real legit metric when it comes to measuring audience scores. And that hasn't come out yet. But the Rotten Tomatoes score is the critic score. That's when you're talking about the Rotten Tomatoes score, that's the critic score, not the audience score, because the audience score can be manipulated and changed at any time. I said that with Justice League. I'm saying it here now. You can't pay attention to it. It's interesting to point out from time to time, but you really can't rely on it as actually meaning anything, at least not anything significant. Thomas Gilkey is writing in, love your show, love the movie, been following you since the AMC days. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Let's see, I think maybe people should just trust the Cinemascore instead of those other two, from Thomas Gilkey. I agree with you, Thomas. I really do. I really do think that the Cinemascore is the only one we can talk about the other ones for sure, but we have to ultimately understand they really don't mean anything whatsoever. Let's see. This one comes to us, going back to Twitter here. This one comes to us from Slim Jimmy, who writes, John, I think The Last Jedi is so overwhelmingly that a straightaway reaction Cinemascore isn't appropriate. Well, then again, then you can't say anybody's reaction is appropriate. And I disagree with that. I'll disagree with you on that, Slim Jimmy, that, this movie you can't give an initial reaction to. Yes, you can. If you can say that about one movie, you can say it about another. Now, lots of movies we'll have different experiences with if we see the 2, 3, 4, 5 times, but if you want to compare apples to apples, take people's reactions after their first viewing. Now, we can have a discussion later about, is this the movie that improves with multiple viewings? That's totally a discussion we can have, absolutely. But in talking about getting first reactions, if you want to compare apples to apples, then you take it after the first viewing. That's the way it should be done. At least that's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of my opinion on that. Thanks a lot for writing in a tweet. This next one says, let's see, where did it go? Why can't I get this to come up? This one comes to us from, there we go, got it back up there. Ryan21127 writes, John, I left the movie thinking most are either going to love or hate it, not seeing much middle ground, 8.5 for me. I'll be honest with you. I really thought, and I still believe, that the vast majority of the movie-going audience is going to love it. But again, like when I came out of the movie, when I came out of my first screening of Star Wars The Last Jedi, I tweeted, really like this movie. I did not like the Finn storyline. I do not like Benicio del Toro's character, but I love just about everything else. And I wrote that, and I had so many people writing at me, John, if you love Star Wars, you wouldn't nitpick. I said, I'm not nitpicking. I'm just pointing out the things I don't like. If you're not mentally weak, you can love something and still acknowledge the negative things in it. And I'm not mentally weak. I'm an idiot, but I'm not mentally weak. So I can acknowledge, I really love this movie, but there are problems in it for me. Now, maybe you'll love the Finn storyline. Maybe you'll love the Benicio del Toro character. Fine. That's great. That's opinion. But I totally could see why there are going to be some people that won't like it and a lot of people that do. I can just tell you, I can just speak to you from my experience. And my experience has been, I quite enjoyed the movie, even though it has flaws. And the audience, I've seen it with 3 audiences now, and every audience I've seen it with has gone bananas. So, I mean, that's all I can say. That's just my experience. You may have had a different experience. That's cool too. That's why it's great to be film fans with other people so we can all have these discussions. Let's see. Let's try another one and then we'll wrap this thing up because I think this has been a really good discussion. Let's see. This one comes to us from Because I Am Batman. I'm Batman writes, I know Cinemascore matters more, but why is the IMDb score so much more higher than the Rotten Tomatoes score? See, that is the big question here. All right? They're both based on audience scores. Both can have people vote on it who didn't see the movie if they didn't want to. So why is one so much higher than the other? When they're basically in the same ballpark with number of votes, one has like 65,000 votes, one has 50,000 votes. So they're in their same neighborhood. Why is one so much significantly higher than the other? Do you have some groups on like Reddit or 4chan, whatever, organizing and trying to get thousands of people to go and downvote something? We've seen that happen. Are we getting groups in other channels trying to organize to go and upvote something even if they haven't seen it? We've seen that happen too. But it does raise... But you know what? Here's the thing. The discrepancy between the audience scores on IMDb and the discrepancy between the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes just goes to prove once again you cannot take either of these scores seriously. Either the positive one or the negative one. Like Metacritic, 86... when we're talking about critic scores, Metacritic 86, Rotten Tomatoes 93, 7% difference. They're basically the same score. They're in totally the same neighborhood. 156 and 181, different ballparks altogether. And I think the fact that we have such discrepancy between these two scores just once again points us towards the fact we should not take either of them at face value. Neither of them. And we shouldn't even 100% take Cinemascore at face value, but out of all 3 of the major audience score metrics, Cinemascore is the one we should listen to more because it actually validates that the people being polled saw the movie and only vote on it once. That's the most legitimate way. Having these other systems that anybody who's not seen the movie can come in and drop 0, 0, 0, or whatever it is they want to drop, or 10, 10, 10, 10, whether or not they've seen the movie or not, makes it completely irrelevant to use as a legitimate score. So again, out of the 4 major scoring systems that we've had, 2 critical ones, 2 audience ones, 3 of them are positive. Rotten Tomatoes 93, Metacritic 86, IMDb's audience score of 81. 1 of them is negative, Rotten Tomatoes audience score of 56. But again, I don't think we should take either the IMDb one or the Rotten Tomatoes one at face value because ultimately they're meaningless. But that's just my point of view on this. You guys may have another one. Jump into the comments section below and leave me your thoughts. So do me a favor, guys. When you see other people tonight debating online, hey, have you seen the great IMDb audience score for The Last Jedi? Or saying the opposite, have you seen the terrible audience score on Rotten Tomatoes? Point them to this video so they can know not to get excited about a positive audience score on IMDb, not to get depressed about a negative audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, because ultimately neither of them mean anything. So we'll just sit down now and wait for the Cinemascore to come out. Anyway, guys, that'll do it for me. Thanks for being here. Remember, we have over 100,000 subscribers on this channel. But we've got room for a lot more. Make sure you click on that subscribe button, become a subscriber to my channel, click the thumbs up button, leave your thought and your comment in the box below, and follow me if you'd like on social media, simply at John Campea. My finger looks weird when I do that. Anyway, that'll do it for me, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's John Campea, and until my next video, bye-bye.